On this Wednesday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, Nick Caserio provides an update on Kenyon Green, amongst other things from a radio interview. And we look at, are people underestimating weapons for CJ Stroud?
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers to this Wednesday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If this is your first time watching or listening to the podcast, thank you for stopping by. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube and where you listen to your podcast. And thank you to all of our returning listeners coming back to continue to listen to us talk Texans here on the Locked On Texans podcast. I'm your Texans football analyst, John Some Sports Guy Hickman. On the other side of the screen, you all know who it is. Texans Credential Media member, Sports Illustrated's own Cody Davis. We have a fun episode today. We're just going to be talking, right? It's going to have a conversation, ending off with what led to Eric Armstead choosing the AFC South Division mate Jacksonville Jaguars over the Houston Texans. There's been a fun conversation, I think, that's been fun on social media surrounding the underestimating getting CJ Stroud weapons. And so we'll talk about that. But we open up today's episode with Nick Caserio, who stopped by Sports Radio 610, said a few things, but I think mainly what we want to talk about today, Cody, was just the update that he provided for Kenyon Green. I do want to let you guys know that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. $200 in your pocket if your bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. Cody, welcome to the show. I know I said a mouthful, right? But Nick Caserio, again, was on Sports Radio 610, and he did give us an update on the 2022 former first-rounder Kenyon Green, the left guard, and everything sounded promising.
Nick Caserio did provide some injury updates on a handful of the Houston Texans injured players. First and foremost, Tank Dell and Titus Howard. He said both of those guys are making progress and they will be ready for the start of training camp. So, of course, that put a big smile on my face and everybody's face. But, John, listeners and viewers, the biggest injury update that he did provide did come with the update on Kenyon Green. He said as of right now, Kenyon Green is farther along in both health, mental health, and everything else in between that he has ever been throughout his career. He also mentioned that Kenyon Green has also taken time to get additional help outside of NRG Stadium to make sure that he is ready for his third year in the league.
Big news.
Let me start off by saying this first. I'm glad to know that Green is taking the necessary steps to get himself ready for year 3, especially on the mental side of things, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many snaps he played in 2022 and 2023 or whatnot. Mental health is very important, especially for Kenyon Green, who has gone through a lot throughout his career. So let me start off by saying that. However, John, listeners and viewers, I'm not going to get too happy talking about what to expect from Kenyon Green until we get closer to training camp and until we actually see him in training camp. And I say that because, look, once again, I understand it. I get it. The first 2 years of Kenyon Green has not gone according to plan. This is a young man who has dealt with several injuries, mental health, and all that other unfortunate stuff. It affected him. But, John, I also look at it from a situation like this. The Houston Texans are no longer trying to establish an identity. The Houston Texans are no longer trying to establish a foundation. This is going to be year 2 of them playing under Coach DeMeco Ryans and Bobby Sloyd. And with them no longer trying to establish anything, a lot of the guys that they're going to add, they're going to be basically plug and play guys. And I look at a situation in Kenyon Green. I know you hate this statement, but I look at a situation like Kenyon Green and say, look, his skill set alone is probably, if you want to debate and say it's on a rookie level or a sophomore level, I will 100% agree, because he has not taken the time to really get a true opportunity to develop and literally work and improve in that area due to unforeseen circumstances. So I look at it from that standpoint. I also look at it from the standpoint that due to the fact he missed the whole entire 2023 season, that you have had other players like Jared Patterson and Juice Scruggs come in, even Kenyon Green come in and make a name for themselves with this organization. I'm looking at it from a standpoint, I'm wondering if all that time away in 2023, how is that going to hinder his development in 2024? But on the flip side, and this is the most positive thing, Jason Kelce retired about a month ago. Had an opportunity to listen to his retirement press conference in Philly. And he talked about how hard it was for him to find his niche on the NFL level during the first 2 to 3 seasons. It was so bad he had several people in Philly wanted to just run him out of town. However, he had a general manager who believed in him and kept him on the team. 10 years later, he's going to go from Philly to Canton, Ohio, within the next 5 or 6 years. And I'm bringing that up because it showcased, look, it doesn't matter what you think about these players when they first come into the league. John, I think one of the best things that you always say when we start talking about a draft and everything is give these players 3 years, because after 3 years, then you know what these players are going to turn into, giving them time to develop and stuff. And Jason Kelce is the perfect example as to why it is always good to never give up on these young prospects.
I think when it comes to Green, everything is not set in stone. I think that this team still wants to unlock the ability to run the ball and run the ball effectively, run the ball efficiently, run the ball as often as they can without taking too much away from their quarterback and CJ Stroud. But they definitely want to add that element to make this offense a little bit more well-rounded. And, you know, with the addition of Joe Mixon, I believe that they will still address that running back position. I don't know if it'll be via free agency or draft, right? There's still some options out there. You still have Damian Pierce on the roster, but I do believe that they're going to be looking to really unlock that, you know, element for this offense. And they talked about it over and over again. I think it boils down to the competition between Kenyon Green or Jared Patterson, because I wholeheartedly believe that Juice Scruggs was brought into this team to be their future center. You look at his last season at Penn State, and this is the guy that has left guard, right guard, you know, some center snaps in 2020, center and right guard in 2021, 886 snaps at center his last year at Penn State, right? And during that year, only 1 sack allowed, only 3 quarterback hits, only 10 hurries, by far his best season, right? And this is, you know, just coming into the season last year, the injury derailed him, but he was set to be this team's center. So I don't want to look at the competition between Green and Kenyon and Juice Scruggs. I think the competition is solely on right now the 2 Greens, Kendrick and Kenyon, and Kendrick Green was almost ran out of Pittsburgh, right? If you guys remember, I think Big Ben was on a podcast, and to say the least, he kind of talked bad about him, right? Came to Houston, a quick resurgence, and I do mean quick because he went down with injury. But if a guy that, you know, honestly was getting ran out of Pittsburgh, I think Kenyon should be able to beat him out. So for that left guard position, I think it just comes down to Green and Patterson. And for Houston, hey, look, if it's Green over Patterson, then Nick Caserio, you're finally able to scratch that off, because right now that's a mark against him, honestly. Right? You could have had Kyle Hamilton, right? We could always play the shoulda, coulda, woulda game, but that's a mark against Caserio to this point. And I do always want to remind you guys, I have not seen an offensive lineman who was 21 years old when he came into the NFL, have to go up against for 8 weeks straight the best defensive tackles in the NFL. I mean, week after week after week after week after week. I mean, it was so many weeks I got weak in my knees I could hardly speak. call it watch him. That's how many weeks he had going up against the top defensive tackles in the league. So the young man has a shot, no doubt about it. And I do think him giving himself time away last year, injury, and then you look at just kind of stepping away to get his self right, his mind right, and now having the opportunity to come in to this season and actually start the season on time, like right now, right? Has not had an offseason since entering the NFL. That's important. I do want to kind of pivot really quick. Nick Caserio said something that I thought was interesting during the radio hit. And he talked about how it seemed like more players this year had a change of heart about their destinations during free agency. And Houston has been linked to every name, right? But I mean, mainly Saquon was the big day one name that they were linked to. Day 4 rolled around. Armstead, who we'll talk about. Chase Young was a name because we saw Chase Young sign for your team, the Saints, a 1 year, $13 million. And if you remember the tweet that I put out there, because we was talking about this, Houston was trying to, get him for a deal that was similar to Jeff Okudah's deal. Jeff signed for 4.5. 13 was just completely way out for what Houston was going to pay. But I think for Nick, I'm glad he said that, because for me, it does show that, hey, guys, I know y'all may not be 100% happy with the results, but this is a two-way street. I can walk it halfway, but somebody else got to walk halfway with me on the opposite side to make this thing work. And we know that in the NFL, Cody, you had an opportunity to be out there doing the combine. How many deals were made behind closed doors? Right? By the way, Kirk Cousins dry snitching on everybody, the trainer and Mooney, telling everybody. I was talking to everybody. That was crazy. Now that he's in Atlanta. But I do think for Nick and for Houston, they had deals set up already in place and understanding in place, what people like to say the gentleman handshake in place. And for Philly, I can understand Saquon going in there offering them more money, but I don't think it was just Saquon. I think that there was a handful of players that Houston had understandings with, and once free agency rolled around, and like you said, change of hearts happened, then now you're looking at this team that I believe hasn't necessarily just gotten better overall, but players that we expected to come here to Houston to play for this team not making it due to their own merit. So I'm glad he said that. Honestly, I respect that. Passion, drive, and patience. That is what brings home the winning trophy. That's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED lights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, style, or all three, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guarantee Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home the winning trophy. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guarantee Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. On this Wednesday episode, we had an opportunity to kind of dive a little bit into Nick Caserio as he provided an update for some of our injured players here in Houston, ending off with, just the conversation around, hey, guys, listen, I know y'all may not like what I've done so far, but we were having conversations, and this is something that Cody and I can vouch for. Like the Houston Texans from day one, probably before day one, did a very good job actively looking to build this roster with some of the bigger names. Like I think Saquon in Houston was right here.
Oh, it was so close. Man.
Almost so close, right? But, for Philly swooping in, I think we're going to see a different Philly next year. They're going to be running the ball more. I think they're going to take the ball out of Jalen Hurts' hands a little bit more. And getting a running back as impactful and dynamic as Saquon was important. Same for Houston, right? And I think that there was a deal done. But talking about Saquon, we talked about Keenan Allen, we talked about the lack of weapons this team has added, right? And in the same sense, Robert Woods and Noah Brown still on this roster. John Metchie, Xavier Hutchinson, 2 rookies on rookie deals, will still be fighting for a spot next year. And we know that, as we mentioned, Tank Dell, who is doing fine right now. He's running routes. 1,000
He's good.
yards.
He's good.
Nico, we know the top 2 dogs at the receiver position. We know about Dalton Schultz at the tight end position. We now know about Joe Mixon. That is great, but Houston desperately needs to improve that wide receiving group. And for me, Cody, before I really get into it, I want to give it to you. For me, I do see the idea of in the conversation that includes the talking point. Well, we got CJ. Everything else will be all right. As long as you got CJ, everything else will be all right. And before I hand it over to you, I just want to say one thing. That is absurd. It's insane to think just because you got this great Lakers had Magic, if not the best, one of the best point guards of all time. They still had to make sure that the weapons were out there for him to dip and dash and do what he had to do. Right? Every year we talk about Bron, and I know I'm switching sports, but every year we talk about Bron and him needing weapons around him and talent around him. And LeBron is one of the best. You can make the argument the best of all time, but he is definitely one of the best facilitators of all time, right? This past year, the Kansas City Chiefs, who Mahomes and Kelsey, they did what they had to do, right? Mm-hmm. But throughout the year, they had a stout defense, right? Mm-hmm. But the conversation throughout the year was they are not going to go into next year without addressing the wide receiver position. And the season hadn't even ended yet. I mean, it was the AFC conference game. And the conversation was they got to go get a receiver next year to replace. I mean, so even the greatest of greats needs the talent around them to sustain their greatness. This ain't 2004 football where you can just hand the ball off, have a nice, tight end option, and maybe one receiver. This ain't your granddad's football. This ain't your dad's football. This is 2024. And people are very much so underestimating getting this young man weapons. Take it away.
I kind of want to cut the Texans some slack. Like, I'm not going to lie. I've been a little bit disappointed that we're in the middle of week 2 of free agency. And they have not added a bona fide, well-known, productive wide receiver to this core.
And let me say this. As Nick Caserio said, and as we've seen, the Houston Texans are actively trying to do that.
And that's what I was getting at. Yeah. Like, I want to cut him some slack because, look, of course, you mentioned Saquon Barkley. They were so close, very close. I understand it, but the Philadelphia Eagles just sprinkled a little bit more money to that 3-year deal. And what is something that we've been saying over the last 2 weeks or so? Nick Caserio. There's only a very select few people who get a 3-year deal right off the bat. As great of a signing as Danielle Hunter was, he only got a 2-year deal. And I believe that the only reason why El Shazier got a 3-year deal is because he already has chemistry and a relationship with Coach D'Amico Ryans. But so, you just missed out on Saquon. And just this past weekend, you were about to land Kenyon Allen in a trade from the Los Angeles Chargers. And even from multiple reports have shown that the Texans had the best trade package out there for the Los Angeles Chargers. But what did I say, John? They did not want to trade Allen to another AFC team, and especially one where you're comparing him with a quarterback like CJ. I do wish that, and look, and I also want to mention this free agency for the wide receiving core wasn't even that appealing, to say the least. The running back market was hella more appealing. And two, and most importantly, you also have a head coach and Coach DeMeco Ryans. I believe they have made about 11 free agency signing. Out of those 11, 9 came on the defensive side of the ball. So you definitely have a defensive-minded coach who wants to build a defense. But John, the one thing that concerns me about everything that you just said about the Texans and how they going about adding weapons, where did Nick Caserio come from? Who was the quarterback of that team? Hey, look. And the one time they paired him with an all-time great wide receiver, they went, perfect all the way up until the Super Bowl. How did that work out?
You don't have to remind me. I don't know. Don't ask me. I wasn't there.
I mean, hey, y'all got 5-6 championships out of it, so it's cool.
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, but to me, I want to cut the Texans some slack as of now because they have tried. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out.
Right, and this isn't an indication of the Texans not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. I just see the conversation by non-Texans brass or whatever, the fans or whatever, and they're so confident, rightfully so, in CJ Stroud and his ability to get it done, where it's kind of like your wide receiver 3 right now is still Robert Woods or Noah Brown. That's not going to cut it. And I'm seeing I'm not going to call it complacency, but I'm seeing the justifying of, it's okay because they got CJ. Mm-hmm. Let me just say this. The Texans will absolutely upgrade their wide receiver room. I wouldn't be shocked if we will see a free agent signing, and maybe if not a free agent signing, I don't know, maybe 2 rookies drafted at their position, right? But I think that they will upgrade. There are too many question marks right now in their receiving core. We all like Hutch, but I mean, let's be honest. And I do like Hutch, but he's a 6th-round pick, and if you can upgrade, you do just that. Robert Woods, I'm just waiting for the news, right? If you upgrade, you must do that. And I think Houston will do a very good job of just having some competitive bodies during training camp.
Question, John. This popped in my head while we having this conversation. We talk a lot about wide receiver 3. Who's to say that the Texans already don't have their wide receiver 3?
Oh, you hinting at John?
Of course, because in the first segment, we just finished talking about not giving up on prospects, especially one who has dealt with a lot of unfortunate circumstances. I understand Kenyon Green went through some struggles, but over the last, year or so, I don't think you could point to nobody on this team that's been through more of a struggle than John Metchie. Because
life is life,
literally. I mean, his very last college game, he tears his ACL, and in the middle of him working his way back from an ACL tear, he gets the news of his cancer, unfortunately, and that literally took him out for the entire year. And all throughout 2023, what I kept saying, this is going to be a year where he's tried to reestablish himself and get into football shape. I know the last time I talked to John Metchie was locker cleanout day, that Monday after they lost to the Baltimore Ravens that Saturday. And he told me in front of his locker that he was definitely taking this entire offseason to really work on his body and get back in shape. Why? Because this is the first time that he has nothing interfering with him getting back to the player that he showcased at Alabama. And remind you guys, this is a young man who caught for almost 2,000 and something receiving yards in his final 2 years at Alabama. Remember how deep that wide receiving draft class was in 2022? His name was among the top of those players. So who's to say? They're like, you know what? We see something in John. We're going to give John an opportunity and a chance. And who's to say come November, we're not sitting here talking about debating whether or not John Metchie should be in the running for comeback player of the year. There's something about John that makes me say I'm not giving up on him, and I think the Houston Texans have that same feeling.
Say goodbye, say goodbye, say goodbye, wave goodbye to all of the busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet wins of $5. That's $200 in your pocket to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit fanduel.com/locked-on and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Before we close out today's show, what led to Eric Armstead choosing the Jags over the Texans, Cody?
Yeah, Eric Armstead had an opportunity to hold his media availability on Monday, had an opportunity to listen to it. And he said there's two things that he was looking at. First and foremost, comfort and a team that values him as a player. John, I understand it. I get it. But at the end of the day, man, I think it truly came down to the Jacksonville Jaguars were willing to give him a contract that he actually wanted. Because remember, we were told by a source, the main reason why the deal fell through between the Texans and the San Francisco 49ers that would have sent Malik Collins to San Fran in exchange for Armstead was due to money. The Houston Texans did not want to take on Armstead's $17 million salary for the 2024 season. Once he became a free agent, he went to a team that gave him a 3-year deal, $51 million, which equals to about $16.5 to $7 million. So he's literally not losing no type of money. And of course, had he signed with the Houston Texans, the Texans were going to try to knock that annual salary down just a tad bit. We don't know the numbers of what they was aiming for, but the Texans were not willing to match the $17 million that Armstead has got from the Jacksonville Jaguars. And it makes sense because as great of a player that Armstead has been throughout his whole entire career, 2 out of the last 3 seasons, he has been hampered by injuries. And Armstead wasn't the only defensive lineman out there on the market trying to cash in, at least for this offseason, due to the fact that they have been hampered by injuries. Me and John both were told that the Houston Texans had their eyes also set on Chase Young. John, I believe he told me that had things went down with Chase Young, the deal would have been equal to what we saw them sign Jeff Okudah to, which was like a 1-year prove-it deal, roughly around about $8 million. He signed with the New Orleans Saints 1 year, $13 million. Shout out to him getting his bag. However, the day after he was introduced to the New Orleans Saints, Ian Rappaport reported that Chase Young will be out for an extended amount of time due to neck surgery, and they are hoping that he is ready to go for a training camp. So I just wanted to bring that up because these are two valuable defensive linemen. I do believe that Coach D'Amico Ryans would have loved to have on his team, being part of that swarm defensive mentality, but these are two guys who have been hampered by injuries. They want their bag, rightfully so, and things just did not work out for the Houston Texans.
Yeah, and in the corresponding move of missing out on Young and Armstead, we know that the Houston Texans signed Tim Settle last week. Today, Tuesday, we're timestamping everything. So we don't know what's going to happen. They did release cornerback Hadar Holman because the Houston Texans signed defensive end Mario Edwards to a 1-year deal. Thank you guys for listening and watching today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody, COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.